Bob, good to see you.
Great to see you as well.
You have been witnessing Chinese government making efforts recently to win, once again, trust and confidence of international investors for win-win results. Now, what is your assessment of these efforts, and how do you see global companies are reacting?
So first off, it's clear through the IBLAC Beijing meetings as well as the CDF meetings that I attended last week that the Chinese government and the various administrative officials are on top of the issues testing their economies. But they are putting forth policies to enhance the economic growth. And then we see the pivot towards much more stable quality growth, more so than anything else before. And the policies are very much focused on both the continuation of the exports. Second is the transformation of the economy. And third is the integration of AI and the digital economies that we see going forward. So when you ask the question about CEOs around the world, let's also ground ourselves in some facts. First, it is a slowing economy worldwide. So they all are looking for growth. China continues to be a growth story, irrespective of the slowdown that may be happening in China, because the relative numbers are actually still relatively good. And that requires the CEOs to say, how can I actually leverage China for servicing Chinese citizens in China? Also, how can I leverage China for supply chain as we think about serving then the rest of the world? So there are many opportunities that the CEO community and their management teams are very much focused on in terms of how to sustain the business and enhance the investment and the willingness to actually continue that on a longer term basis looking ahead.
How do you see the transformation of the Chinese economy, a word that you mentioned also in your earlier answer? And also, how do you see that is influencing your portfolio here in China and beyond?
Yes, one thing to point out, and this comes out of our PwC CEO survey that we launched in Davos that you actually talked to us about, is that the Chinese CEOs are much more aware of the need to transform themselves because of the external factors that are moving so fast. In fact, it's one of the highest countries that has that awareness. And it's also based upon the fact that the Chinese economies have seen so much change when you look at regulation, IT, digital economies, and the world of commerce going forward. Now, the things that are happening today in China are very specifically focused on two larger phenomenons we see globally, that being AI as well as climate. And both of those are moving very fast in China. Not surprising when you look at the totality of the country, all focused in those areas to take advantage of the opportunities that have been put forth and the policies that the government has actually set for itself as a country. As a result, we, PwC, are navigating that same change and making sure we're enabling our trust services to be doing the job that we needed to do, but also to advise on business model transformation or reinvention with those two themes in mind. So we're recruiting quite a bit as you look at AI capabilities, digital capabilities, and climate capabilities in helping organizations with the future challenges and the many opportunities that will be coming their way.
You know, Bob, that some of the sectors that were earlier the pillars of the economic growth now become relatively flat. And therefore, for any company, global company that have been working with China on those sectors, have to also make a smooth transition, quote unquote. So how do you see the ultimate strategies, well, you can adopt during this smooth transition, quote unquote?
We've got to enhance the skill sets of our people and, if necessary, add capabilities so we can continue to build trust and actually solve for those problems. And the companies that are in China, no matter what sector exists today and what may be growing fast or slowing down, all of them have to go through the business model transformation. All of them have to be more trusted as well. So we see ourselves adding skills and competencies in those two areas across all sectors and across most of the regions across all of China as well. So that's a big opportunity for long-term growth for us and our value add in terms of the Chinese economies and the foreigners that are operating in China today.
Right. The last few talks I had with you, just before, right after 2023, I saw you in traveling in very different parts of the world, looking at your business up close. So can you give me some takeaways out of these trips, how the world is evolving and what does that mean for your daily input?
You see the world actually breaking down in a couple of pieces. First, you see some parts of the world slowing down, other parts of the world speeding up, other parts of the world transforming their economies on a slow, sustained basis. And allocating the resources into those countries to maximize the potential that people have is going to be really important. So again, moving with speed, seeing the opportunities, minimizing the downside risk is going to be a needed skill set in managing the portfolio. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, that's clear is that organizations don't have a clean playbook anymore to deal with the many changes that are coming their way. So again, my words previously, scenario planning, having multiple options of choices, and being able to learn fast and fail fast is another learned skill that's going to be important moving ahead. And the last piece here, Tian, is you've got to be much more effective and efficient. Having a strong balance sheet, having the effectiveness and efficiency of an organization, and using data and technology to be most effective and efficient to do that in scale is going to be another needed skill set. And in this case, we see organizations trying to take out and eliminate bureaucracy, that being the fragmentation or the friction that gets in the way of a decision being executed effectively and efficiently. So that's another element of change that we see going forward.
Supply chains, you talk about that regarding China's role for global companies. You see some of the policies as a result of geopolitics have been changing so fast. So how would that supply chain role be designed? After all, sometimes the designing process would take even longer than, the policy changes.
Well, first and foremost, organizations now have to put speed in the amount of change they're going to have as they become an alternative for supply chain. So that ability to move very fast and scale up very fast is going to be a key ingredient. But let's come back to some basics around supply chain. Every organization is going to be looking for an effective and efficient supply chain that's cost enabling. They're going to look for a supply chain that's much more greener than ever before. And they're going to look for a supply chain that gives it the right amount of data so they can actually decide quickly what to do. And that what to do means buy more or less, price differently, up or down. And those data points become really important. So the supply chain working within its ecosystem is another element of change that's going to be needed.
At this point, how do you examine the factor of AI? How much do you see global companies, when they are working with China, also bringing that factor in?
It's clear that the Chinese economy and the CEOs in China believe this is going to be a fast adoption within China. The second thing, though, that's important here is the lessons learned in adopting AI to your benefit. So first and foremost, AI is not necessarily just focused on productivity gains. There's a revenue opportunity that should come from that as well. And this is where organizations have to actually be mindful on both sides. 70-some-odd% of the CEOs that say they're going to adopt AI are looking for reductions in labor costs, which tells you they're so focused on the cost side, not the revenue side. So that's one flip that people should be focused on. Second is you've actually got to build it into your digital and your broader transformation agendas. A lot of times organizations are thinking about AI as a bolt-on to something else. It's actually going to be built in much more so. Third, you got to lead with humanity. What AI does is changes work processes. It changes needs of labor forces. So looking at it holistically with humans enabled by technology, enabled by the generative AI is going to be super important. And the more AI that's embedded within supply chains, the bigger the draw is going to be for organizations to want to use that. It'll be more effective and efficient, more cleaner, and be rich in data for decisions to be made better than ever before.
Right. And finally, before we go, Bob, we see media reports recently, one after another, about the competition for talents among the top accounting firms and consultancy firms, including yours. So at there are two sides of the things. One is, of course, looking for talents that are in huge need these days in order to develop the new sectors that you just mentioned. The other thing is reskilling the already existing staff about the future. So how is that being massaged, these two ideas together within your organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. Talent management is becoming so important. You should think about its ability to actually enable the strategic execution that an organization has. And you started with two things. I'm going to add another one, which is how do we
Okay.
actually bring in new skill sets? So that's going to come from talent acquisitions, recruiting in new and different places. And clearly in China, we will be looking at some additional schools to go after that, in addition to then the mid-career hires. M&A will become part of that issue as well. The second piece is the investment that we make in upskilling and reskilling. And in this regard, we're spending billions of RMB in terms of upskilling our existing workforce to be fit for future going forward. The third that I want to add to the mix is how do you create the right environment to retain those people? And that's equally as important because that's a talented group of people that will be demand elsewhere. So we're also doubling down on what does it take to retain the people that we have today. And you have to actually be smart about not only the skilling, but also allowing for them to redesign the work that they actually perform. By doing that, they're more willing to be part of the process rather than have the process be done to them. If they're part of that process, they're more productive, they're more engaged, they're more willing to be productive as an individual and a better team player. So that's equally as important as the recruitment of these new skills or the upskilling of these skills. Retention is another challenge. That's a big opportunity that we see in China, and PwC is investing quite a bit to make that a reality.
Finally, before we go, Bob, I remember talking to you during the last APEC economic leaders meeting, and you were helping us to look at the future of 2024. Now we are already a quarter into 2024. This is a dramatic year, not to mention the elections going on in the US. So at this point, how do you see the rest of the year and the uncertainties that all of us are likely to experience?
Well, at the time we were there together at APAC, we talked about that uncertainty and how organizations need to manage it. That uncertainty continues. In fact, I'm going to say there's even more of it as you look at the pace of change that's happened. When we did that survey, generative AI, for example, was just at the start of being launched. And we've had a couple of more months, and we see now more recently, especially in China, the evolution and the advancement that's come extremely quick, probably quicker than anybody ever predicted. So that uncertainty remains. The other things we talked about, though, is how do organizations remain, I'll call it nimble in their organization, and what does it require leaders to do? And this is both corporate leaders, but also political leaders. And again, it's really important for them to have a degree of resiliency to move ahead. It's going to have to require some thick skin because there's challenges no matter where you look and no matter what you say and do. And you actually have to be very determinant in terms of having a path forward with optionality, because the linear planning of old has been thrown out the window. So it's a lot more variability and a lot more optionality that's out there. Options, theories, games is the way to go as we look at the economies, not only in China, but also around the rest of the world.
Bob, good to see you. Thank you so much, as always.
You as well. Thanks.